Please be seated. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Middlesbrough Council. You may have to bear with us through a few of the agenda items. There may be minor changes due to the amount of apologies for absence we've had for this meeting. So, getting straight on with the business. First item on the agenda, apologies.
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from councillors Biswas, Blythe, Brunton Dobson, Carr, Dryden, Higgins, Hubbard, Morstan, McCabe, McIntyre, McTighe, Charles Rooney, Nicola Walker and Walkington.
Thanks for that, Mr. Roberts. Any further apologies? Okay, can we note those? Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody got any? Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meetings of the Council held on the 5th of September and the extraordinary meeting of the same date. Move those minutes as correct. Can we agree? Thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements, communications. I'm not aware of any for this meeting. Agenda item 5, petition from our Greenways. Is Mr. Wade Tovey in the room? Okay, I invite you to come and hand your petition in to the Executive Member for Development and Infrastructure, Councillor Lewis Young. Yes. Okay, Mr. Tovey, you have 2 minutes to speak to your petition.
Chairman, can I just check? Actually, thank you for allowing me to speak. We do actually have 1,928 signatures from Middlesbrough, which I've handed in, and I understand we would normally be able to speak for 5 minutes, but I have been advised it's 2 minutes. And
it is 2 minutes, yes.
I will try to keep
Okay, thank you.
We are a non-political South Middlesbrough group seeking to protect and enhance our greenways. We are not NIMBYs. We recognise the need for a range of housing to meet expected demand. We recognise and endorse the drive for city status, which need not be at the expense of so many greenways, which, along with proper transport and other infrastructure, all help to make a city a place that people want to live in. We appreciate that the Council, in a time of austerity, wish to farm council tax, as one of our petitioners put it. We don't believe that sufficient creative vision and energy has gone into the medium and long-term infrastructure in the rush to support development. Our community of South Middlesbrough is not only an essential part of the town's growth, but also a major gateway into the town for commuters and businesses from surrounding areas, with many developments there too. We await the ARUP report on the Joint Strategic Transport Needs Assessment Plan, which we think should be considered before any work commences. Meanwhile, the previous ARUP report is, at the very least, open to the interpretation that the Dixon's Bank proposal will make little difference to traffic flow if the number of commuters using cars increases. In fact, at our demonstration on Monday, most drivers in the Martin Crawl go straight into town. They can turn left now, but most choose not to, as turning left leads to other crawls at peak hours especially, and going up to 5 miles further. Section 106 funding for Dixon's Bank is £1.7 million. A lot of money in times of austerity, but only a part of the money from one developer, with more due from developers of another 3,000 plus houses. Before such cash is spent, trees cut down, and we think more greater innovative thinking, consultation and a comprehensive list of options is required, working in partnership with other stakeholders in the private sector. We are delighted, I saw in the Gazette last night, that you are now considering a park and ride using the existing railway, so people are encouraged out of cars, especially those connected with James Cook and the university, our 2 biggest employers. But what about incentives to car share by providing cheap and better parking? What about working with employers and schools to stagger hours to spread the traffic flow? What about more intelligent traffic lights? We, in our and other groups, perhaps a movement, feel strongly that these issues must be addressed. We are gaining momentum with a summit meeting soon, and no stone will be left unturned in the coming months. All we ask is that the Council engages the community in a genuine discussion about options and constructively considers feedback. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tovey. Councillor Young, do you wish to respond?
Yeah, I would say thank you to Mr. Tovey for his petition, which we shall look into. I would say that a few points. The local plan is a consultation. We're discussing that today. That is a strategic policy. The joint assessment that has been alluded to, we've added some extra asks onto it, and that will be coming forward in probably late this year as a draft. But like I said, we will look into his petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, agenda item 6, questions from members of the public. We have quite a few tonight. So, as we did at the previous meeting, there are a number of them that will be taken together, and the executive member will give one single response to them. But the first question, which is for the Mayor, is from Jackie Elder. Mrs. Elder.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Given that prevention is better than cure, particularly with regard to the frequency of outrageously high speeds of vehicles driven on the streets and roads of Middlesbrough, will you safeguard the lives of our citizens by organising, together with the Chief Constable, a town-wide campaign to stop this reckless behaviour, utilising speed strips to detect the worst areas of offending, radar guns to then record and fine the offenders, and posters to warn people of the dangers of speeding to life and limb?
Thank you very much, Ms. Elder. Mayor?
Thanks, Mr. Elder. I'll keep the reply fairly brief for obvious reasons tonight. The Council do already work closely with the Chief Constable on a wide range of road safety initiatives through the Cleveland Strategic Road Safety Partnership. The partnership does already target resources so they're most effective and evidence-led. We engage in several road safety campaigns already jointly with the police throughout the year. We coordinate these activities with neighbouring authorities for maximum impact. And the Council also considers potential road safety improvements as part of capital schemes. But I acknowledge this is a serious matter, and I'll review with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, second question is from T. Nicholson, and it's for the Executive Member for the Environment and Commercial Services. Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In view of the Central Government's recently issued report on the effects of global warming and the necessity for all UK citizens to act responsibly, my question is...
Excuse me, Councillor Nicholson, that isn't your question.
No, my question is...
Oh, sorry, right, okay, just ask your question, please.
Yeah, what expenditure was incurred by Middlesbrough Council between the 31st of March 2017 and the 1st of April 2018 on the planting of trees for the whole of Middlesbrough, and for this figure to be broken down for Nunthorpe, Martin West and Martin East?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Councillor Rooney.
Right, thank you, Mr. Nicholson, for your question. I have a total of, as a whole, Middlesbrough Council spent approximately £18,983 on trees across the whole of Middlesbrough. For the south, which includes Nunthorpe, Martin West and Martin East, which is how we break it down, so it's the best I can give you in terms of the area, we spent £3,842, and that included the amount that was contributed from the parish council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next set of questions are all on a similar theme, and they're all for the Executive Member for Economic Development and Infrastructure. So I'll invite the various people to ask the questions, and then the Executive Member will reply to all four. The first question is from D. Murdoch, who unfortunately can't attend the meeting tonight, but he has asked me to read the question out. The question is as follows. The Joint Strategic Transport Needs Assessment was due to report in July 2018. When did it report to Middlesbrough Council? When will it be made available to the public? So that's the first question. I'll now invite Mr. Tovey to ask a question. Mr. Tovey.
Thank you. In an email to a fellow resident, Councillor Young stated that the Council are not proposing to introduce noise barriers or reduce the speed limit on Dixon's Bank. Can Councillor Young explain the reasoning for not taking these essential measures to mitigate the impact of the proposed road widening?
Thank you, Mr. Tovey. Third question is from J.M. McClintock. Okay, Mr. McClintock, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. What progress has been made by Middlesbrough Council between 30th September 2017 and 1st of October 2018 towards the establishment of the Nunthorpe Park and Ride? Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question here is from A. Walker. Mr. Walker, yep. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Budd, councillors. My question for Councillor Lewis Young, the Executive Member for Economic Development and Infrastructure, is as follows. In view of the facts that the conclusions of Arup's report of September 2016 and Arup's addendum of December 2016 are not consistent, and that Arup has declared that its December addendum does not seek to supersede the findings presented in its May and September report, why does Councillor Young selectively quote from part of the addendum rather than give an accurate summary of both Arup reports in order to justify his determination to spend 1.7 million on a project about which Arup has expressed such significant misgivings?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. I'll now invite Councillor Lewis Young to respond to those questions. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the questions. I will, again, provide a written response as well. I'll take them in order. As we've said just previously, there's no date has been agreed for the publication, as we've added some additional requests to the assessment, the scope of the assessment, and we expect it to be as a draft later this year. Mr. Tovey's question states that those are essential works, but they haven't been identified as essential works. What was identified was noise-reducing materials and resurfacing, and that's what we are doing. And there has been no requirement to alter speed limits. I suppose the answer is we haven't really made any direct progress because it is within the Redcar and Cleveland Borough. We have, however, been working with them positively as both members and officers, and we will support them in their efforts to bring it forward, but the momentum is down to them. And finally, all reports and the technical advice we received were taken into consideration in deciding to progress with the scheme, but both reports should be read together. I think the simple fact is Arup, while recognising that the scheme is part of a wider package, supports the scheme as an improvement in, and I quote, the context of the current network conditions, that is from the forecasting report, and goes on to recommend its implementation as has been seen in the addendum.
Thank you, Councillor Young. The final question of the evening is from J.A. Slater, and again it's for Councillor Young. Mrs. Slater.
Thank you, Chair. In view of the fact that the Council failed in its duty to inform residents of Cader, Trimdon and Ayrsham wards of the consultation for the Stainsby scheme, should not the Council restart this consultation due to its undemocratic lack of notifications to its constituents?
Thank you, Ms. Slater. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we don't recognise the statement that we have either failed in our duty to inform residents or that is in any way undemocratic, and we do not believe that there is a need to restart this process. As a way of context, I'd like to say that the event was promoted through all ward councillors. I know that some ward councillors, the Ayrsham ward councillors in particular, disseminated that information. It was featured within the council's website and social media. There was a press release that the Gazette took up and have reported twice on both the consultation stages. There was also coverage on BBC Tees. The consultation, I believe, we demonstrated that the consultation had a wide public awareness by the fact that people from Trimdon, Cader and Ayrsham, but also across Middlesbrough attended. But actually we had some people from Thornaby and Ingleby Barrack there as well, and I think that shows the wider awareness of that consultation event.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, agenda item 7, Mayor's statement and report. Mayor Budd.
Thank you, Chair. I think at least one person in this chamber will probably be bored rigid with what I'm going to say, because I'm going to say the same thing again, Councillor Young. This is about an update on austerity and the effect that it has on this council and very many other councils in the country. This week has seen the launch of what's called a Breaking Point campaign, which I think is well named. as many council budgets are now at breaking point. Austerity has caused huge damage to communities up and down the UK, including this town. Devastating effects on key public services that protect the most defenceless in society, children at risk, disabled adults and vulnerable older people, and the services we all rely on to keep clean streets, libraries and children's centres. Tory cuts, and let's face it, they are political decisions. Tory cuts means councils have lost 60 pence out of every pound that the last Labour government was spending on local government in 2010. Councils had to spend an extra £800 million last year to meet the demand on vital services to protect children. An ageing population and demand on adult social care faces a gap of £3.5 billion, with only 14% of council workers now confident that vulnerable local residents are safe and cared for. Government cuts have seen children's centres and libraries close all over the country. And there is less and less confidence by council workers in what they are able to do. Northamptonshire, as I've mentioned before, has gone bust due to incompetence nationally and locally. They are not the only one. Every day sees lists from various organisations of other authorities under pressure, including some in our area. We have managed to cope with this, but it is not getting any easier. Councils now face a further funding gap of £7.8 billion by 2025, just to keep services standing still. Lord Gary Porter, the Conservative chair of the Local Government Association, has said, quote, "Councils can no longer be expected to run our vital local services on a shoestring." This is not just a Labour story. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Liz Truss, stated on Newsnight on the 1st of October that the government is, quote, "not making cuts to local authorities," unquote. All independent assessments of government spending show that this is entirely false. I also note that Prime Minister Theresa May, between dancing, has also claimed that austerity is over, despite planning a further £1.3 billion cuts of council budgets in the next year. So therefore, Breaking Point has suggested the following. To get the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to end austerity, if they really mean it, by using the budget to reverse next year's planning £1.3 billion cut to council's budgets, and, in line with what the LGA have suggested for some time, immediately invest £2 billion in children's services and £2 billion in adult social care to stop these vital services collapsing, and pledging to use the spending review next year to restore council funding to 2010 levels over the next few years. So what am I going to do about it? I support this campaign absolutely. A petition, which I've also signed, will be handed into number 10 tomorrow. I've signed a letter to the national newspaper, which will go out this weekend. And I'll write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, setting out the funding pressures faced by our local authorities in the hope that the government really means that this is an end to austerity. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Budd. Any questions, comments from the elected members? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I wonder if the Mayor, and I've certainly signed the petition that the Mayor has mentioned, and there's gathering momentum. And I think it is interesting that Lord Porter's comments and the fact that he is a Conservative member is making us aware of the alarming prospects ahead of us. But I wonder whether the Mayor has also read the recent research from the Cambridge University, because although those cuts have been absolutely draconian, and that local government's lost nearly 50% of its spending power since 2010, that share of that pain hasn't been equitable and hasn't always fallen on the shoulders of those that could most afford it. In fact, the report showed that the idea that austerity, and I'm quoting from the report, the idea that austerity has hit all areas equally is nonsense. And this is Mia Gray, who's an economic and social geographer at Cambridge. She said the distribution of the cuts across Britain should be seen as highly political. A swathe of Middle England in the south, particularly the economically prosperous home counties, have seen relatively tiny cuts to spending and are far better equipped to raise local taxes. So very clearly, these attacks on local government and our people have been much less than equitable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just following on from what Councillor Thompson said there, a couple of numbers that sort of stood out for me. Middlesbrough Council will have lost between 2010 and 2020 £48 million, which represents £818 per household, whereas the Leafy Rutland Council will have lost, over the same period, £191,000, which represents £191 per household. That council is entirely Conservative and independent, with one Liberal Democrat. So when people say it's political, there's a reason for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of this is about perception, really. Cuts to things like health are quite tricky to do, because when you cut health, people think of hospitals and doctors and nurses. When you cut education, that's difficult as well, because people think about schools and teachers. And those things are really easy to pin down. Local government's harder to pin down. And the perception out there is it's difficult for people to understand sometimes the breadth of things that local councils do. And I think that means that it's an easy thing for the government to say, well, that's a line through the budget we can easily manage. Local government and the service it provides, the work it does on behalf of local people, is essential. And it's part of the fabric of local society. It's the public service that will affect every day of everyone in this town's lives. And our experience of local government is formative. It is formative in the sense that local government will provide the children's centre that might be your nursery. It might be the place where you loan your first library book when you learn to read. It could be the place where you rent your first home, or the place where you get married and register as a married couple, where you register your children. It could be a place that directs you to jobs or training or apprenticeships that provides you with a career for your life. And it's a place you go at the end of your life when people want to celebrate your life through bereavement services. The council touches every part of our lives, and when cuts are made to local authorities, it matters. And it's all under threat. Local government is massively under threat. The existence, the institution of local government is under threat. And it's at the heart of the public realm, which is in danger from staggering budget cuts. And I'll just finish by saying that there is only one way to fix this. And don't believe the hype. Austerity is not over, and it'll only really be over when we elect a Labour government, and it can't come too soon.
Councillor Lawton.
Just to clarify what the Mayor has just said, because over the last few years, this Tory government and their austerity policy has reduced the government grant to Middlesbrough Council by approximately 60%. The Tory government has introduced legislation that passes the buck of providing funding for health and social care, the safeguarding of children from central government to local authorities, without providing the specific extra funding for the Middlesbrough Council to implement these legislative changes. Increases in the numbers and usage of food banks, compounded by the bedroom tax and the rollout of universal credit, has further impacted negatively on the services this council provides. The whole town is suffering, particularly the most vulnerable residents in Middlesbrough, by the increasing of council tax to cover the Tory cuts. An example of this action is that we raised an extra £2 million by increasing council tax in the 2017-2018 financial year. Sheer madness and heartlessness is an apt description of this Tory government's policies, and they're penalising local authorities, in particular the borough, by their imposition of financial penalties against the borough which the Tories have attached to their laws. This Westminster madness is being compounded by pure incompetence by the Mayor and his executive committee. Specifically, that with all of these financial problems and pitfalls, the Mayor has said that he recognises and makes difficult for the financial management of services, why did the Mayor and this executive committee authorise a £406,000 gift to one of the richest private companies in the DTV area in the last financial year? That gift represents about 25% of the extra funds raised from council tax on the residents of the borough. who allowed this council to give away the hard-earned income of the residents of the borough to this company who have inflated their costs to increase their profits, thus robbing the people of the borough of their hard-earned income. Let's give it away, Mary.
Councillor Chris Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I just had to say this, that over the past year, we have employed managers, events teams, people that we can probably manage without if we're in an absolute terrible, terrible situation. But we can't be in such a terrible situation because we keep employing these people, and I'm yet to see what they're going to do. Thank you.
Councillor Jacob Young.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered what the Mayor's justification was for increasing senior officer pay over the last year by 300,000, given the austere times that we're in. Thank you.
Councillor Rathmell.
As part of the Mayor's statement there, he referred to austerity impacting children. So it would be worth questioning why we don't get a better understanding of how much it impacts this authority. For example, we've had and seen significant weaknesses that were identified by Ofsted in a recent inspection of children's services on the 31st of August 2018. That was in Middlesbrough, and the serious failings included management oversight, decision-making, analysis of demand and staffing levels, and relationships with partners. Given the other issue of this authority, well, the Mayor, his executive and senior officers having issues with relationships, whether they're internal or external, perhaps the Mayor would like to offer some openness and transparency instead of not reporting back on these poor Ofsted findings. That would assist members in understanding the outcome. And also, could you perhaps give some background as to how the government cuts have directly impacted, and give us reassurance that they haven't had a negative impact on looked after children? And I appreciate you looking confused there, Mayor Budd, so I can email you the reports and the letter if you need it. Thanks.
Okay, Mayor Budd, I'll give you the opportunity to respond to the comments so far.
Thank you. Right, in no particular order, let's go back some years now. I have mentioned on many occasions about the Osbornomics, as they were, which have continued, about the government's move towards a small state, and about, as Councillor Storey mentioned, about these cuts really being about redistribution. We started in, I think, about 2011. We compared ourselves with, for example, Wokingham. After that, compared ourselves as Teesside with Surrey. As the northeast of England, through ANEC, we created a report which was on BBC News, all of which proved what I just said. Did we get anything for this? Well, we got some satisfaction because we knew we were right. Did we get any money? None. So we've known for a long time that this has been going on, and I've been saying this over and over again, and I make no apologies for that. There is a way out of this. The government could do what has been suggested by authorities all over the country. Will it? Well, we'll see in the budget, won't we? A lot of this discussion could equally have been around police and crime, the NHS and CCG problems, about education and schools and teachers. But this was specifically about local authorities. I make no apologies for employing staff. I find that an odd thing to say. As Councillor Rathmell will well know, we have mentioned on a number of occasions how the proportion of senior staff salaries has gone down over a period of time, more than it has at any other level. We still need people who know what they're doing, and again, I make no apologies for that either. Every organisation that I can think of, and Councillor Thompson has mentioned in the most recent one, a Cambridge University report last week, it echoes and says the same thing over and over again. The LGA, the LGRU, the IFS, virtually everybody you can think of, apart from perhaps the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, have been saying the same thing for a long time now. The government must listen. At least we've got a Prime Minister who now says austerity is over. She's got to prove that now.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, you are allowed one opportunity to speak, Councillor, and you've already spoken once. No supplementary questions, Councillor. You're allowed to speak once, say everything you need to say the first time. Okay, no further questions. Moving on. Agenda item 8, Deputy Mayor and Executive Member Reports. Right, you may have noticed there are 4 members of the Executive who've submitted their apologies for this meeting. And a number of them have had questions submitted, well, people indicated they would like to ask the question. We've got 2 options. You can either ask your question, an officer will note it, and the executive member will circulate an answer via email, or alternatively, you can just submit your question in email, and an email response will be circulated to everybody. So what I propose to do, we have got quite a lot of questions, so I'll just go down the list, and I'll invite the people what they choose to do. So the first set of questions would have been for Councillor Rooney, Charlie Rooney, who's submitted his apologies. So, Councillor Jacob Young, you had a question you wish to ask on Middlesbrough Railway Station. Do you wish to ask the question, or will you just submit an email question?
Email, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Chris Hobson, you were asking a question on Christmas activities. Will you email your question?
I'd like to ask the question, please.
Okay, fair enough.
Last year, we purchased wooden cabins for a Christmas market. I see no mention in the Christmas activities of a Christmas market. Does this mean we've wasted money yet again? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, we'll get an email response circulated to all members. The third person with a question for Councillor Rooney is Councillor Mohan. Invest Middlesbrough Breakfast Exchange. Do you wish to submit your question by email, or do you wish to ask it, Councillor Mohan? Thank you very much. Next question is on TZAMP by Councillor Story. Do you wish to ask it or email it, Councillor? Okay.
I just wanted to say how pleased I am to see this developing. It's good to see the Tees Valley Combined Authority doing what it's there to do, which is to support projects delivered by the council, Middlesbrough Council, leading on big projects like this. One of the things a lot of people do say out there, when you talk to people on the street, they do often say, we don't make things on Teesside anymore, that manufacturing's not happening. Well, this is proof positive that it is happening. Manufacturing does still exist on Teesside. We do make things, and we will be making things. And we'd be making a lot more things if the Tory government hadn't allowed our steelworks to go to the wall, but that's another debate. But it's good to see this happening, and hopefully it'll bring jobs and growth to the town and to the wider Tees Valley. So congratulations to all involved.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Next set of questions are for Councillor Rostron. First one, Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rostron. Adult social care is one of the largest budgets, understandably, and it covers a variety of very important areas and deals with some of the most vulnerable people. Why is it that the only update provided on adult social care is about intermediate care and re-enablement? Why hasn't full council received recent updates on the progress on ensuring that our most vulnerable residents are not being illegally deprived of their liberty through failings of yourself for not effectively overseeing the backlog? And can you assure me and make assurances to full council that at this present moment in time, no one in Middlesbrough is being illegally deprived of their liberty? Thank you.
Councillor Rostron.
Thank you, Chair. It's sufficient to say that there was no point in me repeating what's been in previous reports, and there hasn't been any dramatic changes apart from with the services provided from the MIC currently. And as you can see, a lot of services will be moving to Phoenix Lodge development opposite the hospital. That includes a lot of the services for reablement, for getting people back into the homes. So if there was anything that I needed to report, I would report it, and I can assure you that people are being cared for in the way we would expect.
Supplementary.
Excuse me. You will, if I invite you to ask a supplementary, you will be allowed to. We have a lot of questions, so I'd ask you to ask a brief supplementary, Councillor.
Simply yes or no, then. Can you guarantee that nobody in Middlesbrough has been illegally deprived of their liberty at present?
I personally couldn't guarantee that, no.
Okay, second question for Councillor Rostron is from Councillor Halawi. Salons for screening and Live Well Centre. Councillor Halawi.
It was not so much a question, it's a statement as to Councillor Rostron to indicate the great involvement the council's had in promoting awareness of good health in the town through the salons for screening, the Cancer Awareness Rocks programme, as well as various issues in the Live Well Centre. Would you like to explain a bit further some of these issues? Because I think they're having a great impact on the town and improving the health of our residents. Thank you.
I think, first of all, thank you for that, Councillor. The screening campaign has been very successful. We won a national award for it. And in fact, other councils are now using our method of making people aware. We do run several national campaigns from the Live Well Centre. One is the Stoptober, which is to help stop people smoking, and the Dry January, which is to help people reduce their alcohol consumption. And we also have the Change for Life, which is a national campaign about improving nutrition for children and the families and physical education. As for the services from the Live Well Centre, and I think it's the Live Well that's a significant part. It's not just about medical intervention and about clinical intervention. Within the Live Well Centre, there are several sessions by different organisations which are run to help people improve their employability, to help them gain confidence and to help them with the filling out application forms and CVs, for example. There's also the sexually transmitted diseases. There are several sessions for the different sexually transmitted diseases in there, particularly for young people. They have a separate session. There are mindfulness sessions for people with mental health problems. I'm just trying to think of all the ones that do go on. There's the baby cafe, which is for breastfeeding mothers. There's the antenatal yoga for mums and babies. It's all about improving people's health. And I think it is, a unique venture, if you like. I don't know of any other town that has a similar initiative, and it has attracted a lot of interest. At this year's Public Health Conference, South Tees Public Health is actually presenting 5 papers to the conference because there's been that much interest in what we're doing in Middlesbrough and Redcar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next set of questions are for Councillor Carr, who was also submitted his apologies. First question is from Councillor Rathmel. Do you want to ask the question, Councillor, or send it in by email? Thank you very much. Next question is from Councillor Udin. Would you like to submit an email or read your question out, Councillor?
Please, Chair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. On Councillor Carr's report, phase 2, it's the looked after children and the corporate parenting. Statement states that the numbers of the looked after children continue to rise. This is a national increase, which is creating pressure on children's services across the country. My question is, Chair, as a corporate parent, as well as with my different hat, the child care practitioner, I'm really concerned and I'm seriously worried what's going to happen to our children. Our children are our future. So I would like to know what's the cause of it, as well as I'd very much like to know what's our central government doing about it. And these children need protecting. So obviously, if Councillor Carr could get some answers for us. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem, Councillor. Councillor Carr will circulate an answer to that. Next set of questions are for Councillor Mick Thompson. First one is from Councillor Goodchild, selective landlord licensing. Councillor Goodchild.
Thanks, Chair. The licensing in Northornsby has been really successful. And what I was wondering is, how do we get that out into the town? Because reading the report, it's really been a really good thing, Mick, and I just wondered if there's any chance of it being rolled out.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for the question, and you're absolutely right. The selective landlord licensing has been a real success in North Hornsby. Property prices are now rising, the number of empty properties is reduced, and those properties that have been empty for a very long time have now been recycled and put into use. And I think one of the great innovative approaches there has been the Community Land Trust that is there, that has been buying up derelict properties, putting them back into use and renting them. So it's been a great success story. You will be aware that there was a scrutiny report that did suggest that I think you were probably part of that did suggest that we look to rolling that out. I have to point out that it is really difficult to convince the government that we need to do this. So there's all sorts of procedures and processes that we need to go through before we can roll that out elsewhere. There's a very clear crying need for this to be done in an area like Newport, where we have significant issues and problems. And I think what was really interesting was that there is a charge to landlords for this, which we've managed to keep to a minimum. And I remember being approached by private landlords in North Thornsby in particular, who were really concerned about the burden on them and the cost to them. I think it's really significant that those complaints absolutely died once the process was underway, because what happens is landlords get assistance with managing their tenancies, and quite often we get people who are very inexperienced, who buy a property as an investment, get a tenant, and then find that they can't manage the tenant or the property. So along with the charge that comes with the licence is the early help that you get from the council. We work with tenants who might be struggling. We work and assist landlords in managing those tenancies. So we've launched the consultation on the Newport area. That still will take some time because there's lots of hoops to jump through, as I say. But I think it is very, very clear that good landlords we welcome here. And there are lots of good landlords. But bad landlords who take no recognition of their responsibilities to the communities in which they work, their days are numbered for doing that. The chances for them to get online, and we hope they'll do that. And I really hope that the consultation process in Newport results in us rolling out the programme there. So watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Second question for Councillor Thompson is from Councillor Lawton, the Town Meal. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see that we've got a series of events coming up to celebrate the town. And it's really important that with the atmosphere of doom and gloom that seems to be pervading every element of our atmosphere right now, that we do encourage our children to enjoy themselves. And I just hope, because I didn't attend myself the town meal, that was a success. And would the council like to report on that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
I think the town meal, along with a whole range of other activities that happened throughout the year, is really, really popular. I know the town meal's been going quite a while, and I know that there are a couple of councillors in the chamber tonight who put a lot of effort into that. I won't name them, I won't embarrass them. But I think the town meal is absolutely excellent. I think it's always interesting that if you want to bring a community together, whatever their differences, whatever their backgrounds, if you introduce food into that process, it always brings people together. And I think particularly the mailer, where the food is quite often the most popular thing on offer. You're right to mention doom and gloom, and I know we always have questions about, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I would have thought that the portfolio of culture and communities would be perhaps the least controversial portfolio. But people will argue that in times of austerity, how can you put on cultural events? How can you employ cultural staff? And I'm always reminded of the words of Oscar Wilde, who was accused of living, and I am as being responsible for culture. I think I do have a responsibility of quoting Oscar Wilde now and again. But Oscar Wilde, when he was accused of living in the gutter by a woman, said, "Madam, we're all living in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Thank you.
Okay, next set of questions for Councillor Lewis Young. Councillor Arundale. Yes, Councillor Arundale, your question for Councillor Lewis Young. Yeah.
Beg your pardon, yes. It's page 2, item 3, planning update. Persimmon Homes and others are looking to put an extra 659 houses exiting onto Ladgate Lane. Now, I understand the situation in the town where the town needs to build more houses to get more income to pay for the social side that's needed in the town. But I'm extremely worried about that number of traffic going onto that road, which most of it will eventually finish up on the Martin Road crossroads. We already have a bad situation on Martin Road crossroads, and I think we're now reaching a situation where the road network is absolutely saturated. I think we ought to really take into account, when we're building all these houses, what effect, because everybody drives cars. You can try to get people to go on buses, which is a good thing, but the vast amount of people won't be dragged out of the cars, so you're going to get huge amounts of cars. Now that impacts the air quality of the town, and we may find ourselves in breaching of air quality legislation from Europe. So I think we really need to consider, when we look at all these housing projects, the effect on the road network. I just think that we're reaching a point where the road network is completely saturated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young?
Yeah, thank you. I think the road network and the impact on it will be considered in all applications, and it's for Councillor Arundel and anyone else to make those representations about that.
Thank you, Councillor. The next question is for Councillor Brunton Dobson, who's submitted her apologies. The question is from Councillor Coop. Do you wish to ask the question, Councillor, or will you submit it via email? Thank you very much, Councillor. Next set of questions are for Councillor Denise Rooney. First one, Councillor Branson, Newham Grange Farm. Councillor Branson.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to refer to the report on the Parks and Recreation, particularly note the substantial increase in visitors to the Newham Grange Leisure Farm in 2018 compared to 2017, up 160% in September, 116% in August. And this is obviously due to the investment in the farm, which has introduced new features such as the woodland walk, hand-safe facilities, and all in all made it a much better place for people to go to visit. We had the Alice in Wonderland event in September, which was very popular with children and parents alike. And I now notice that the farm is getting rave reviews on TripAdvisor. And I just wanted to ask the executive member what her comments are on why the farm has been so successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally agree with you. I've been along to the farm on a number of occasions, taking my grandchildren. It's looking fantastic. If anybody went to it some time ago, 12, 18 months ago, they would have seen something that was still well loved but was quite tired. That is now being rectified. We've got new facilities down there. We've got new play facilities. The children are having a great time. In reference to the Alice in Wonderland event, in the number of visitors, they increased over that weekend from 442 the year before to 1,677. We are projecting a massive income in takings for the farm. We're looking at possibly around £100,000 as an increased income over the next year. And I'd like to just pay my great thanks to the project team who are delivering this. We've got some new project workers down there. They've got some really exciting ideas as to how this is being put into place. And they're working extremely well down there. We're looking forward to the Halloween event, which is referenced in the report. And we're working towards putting something quite spectacular on for Christmas, I understand. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. We now have two people who wish to ask Councillor Rooney a question on the same topic. So I'll invite the two questions collectively and then Councillor Rooney can respond. So first question is from Councillor John Hobson on Albert Park. Councillor Hobson.
It isn't really a question, this, it's a statement. It's relevant to your report, page 2, paragraph 3, regarding the Battle of Britain parade. As a councillor, I have always understood that it's part of my civic duty to attend these events. The event itself was very well organised by civics, was also extremely well attended by the public. Well, it's a great pity that we can't say the same about councillors' attendance, because out of the 30 Labour councillors that we had, only 3 managed to put in an appearance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Arundale, you also have a question on Albert Park? No, that's okay, that's fine. Councillor Rooney, I don't know if would you like to respond?
Just to say thank you for your comment and just try and encourage as many people to attend as many of these public events that we have as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, the final set of questions are for Councillor Nikki Walker, who's also unfortunately had to submit her apologies. So the first, I understand you have a composite of 6 questions you would like to ask Councillor Lawton relating to the annual audit part and the annual audit report. Do you wish to ask them, or are you going to submit them in an email and we'll get them replied? Okay, if you can. Okay, yeah, I understand it's a composite of 6 questions you wish to ask.
When we go straight through them.
Yes, well, there's nobody to answer them, Councillor, so that's the only option.
Just go straight through them, eh? Firstly, on point number 3, it's great to see after years of receiving qualified accounts from the auditors, we at last almost have a clean bill of health, if it wasn't for those pesky due diligence and governance reprimands. The report refers to the false and misleading information circulated by some regarding the asset sales, but unfortunately this negativity still seems to be ongoing. The exec report implies that asset sales were all golden, when in fact the auditors never examined the asset sales from the angle of questionable financial dealing. So I agree with the exec member that it looks as though those members continuing to peddle the falsehood of a clean bill of health on the asset sales are still trying to fool the public. While it's encouraging to get a set of accounts that is not qualified, even though there are serious criticisms and implications regarding due diligence, does the exec member not agree that the bar has been set very low if we think that this report is justification for all the years of secrecy, closed-door policies, and incompetent financial management? Point number 4, regarding value for money. The auditors examined asset disposal policy presented to the committee in December 2016. Can the exec member guarantee that value for money has been achieved excuse me, in the sale of Vancouver House, which is a much more current contract, and as usual this Labour Council, the agreement was conducted in secret behind closed doors? Point number 5, if contracts and negotiations are conducted in secret behind locked doors and the general public only see the final deal that is presented to them, then how can they have any faith or trust in those procedures that this Labour Council follow? Point 6, part 1. The auditor's concerns over due diligence and governance were expressed yet again. These concerns raising the spectre of the complete hash of the sales of Acklam Hall and the TAD Centre in terms of due diligence by the Labour Council. The tenants in Vancouver House are concerned about the future of their businesses and are unable to achieve any meaningful contact with the new owners. Can the exec member assure this chamber and those tenants that a complete risk assessment was carried out by this council prior to selling Vancouver House, and the risks to those tenants was fully assessed and costed, and will you publish the risk assessment for the tenants so that they can access it to read? Point 6, part 2. Were the names or identities of those members and officers who need their relationships improving revealed to the auditors? Point 7. Were the names of identities of those members and officers who need their relationships improving revealed to the Corporate Affairs Committee? And point 9, I greatly appreciate the exec's gratitude for her thank you to me for my robustly challenging this Labour Council in the appropriate manner. Point 25, I have not received my certificate yet.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor. Without being flippant, could I ask that you do email those just so we can ensure that the executive member does give you a comprehensive response. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Final question, again, is for Councillor Walker. It's from Councillor Rathmell. Do you wish to ask the question, or would you like to submit an email? Email, okay, thank you. Right, that concludes all the questions without notice on executive reports. Agenda item 9, report of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Councillor Shaddocks.
Due to being ill for the past couple of months, Councillor Story is sat in as Vice Chair and will be presenting tonight for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Can we note the report? Thank you. Publication of the local plan. Councillor Lewis-Young.
Thank you, Chair. This is not the culmination, but it's the next stage of the statutory process we're required to go through, which is to create development for Middlesbrough and set out policy and land allocations to guide development in the area. It's been a long process, and this is followed on from the preferred options consultation, and we're bringing the completed local plan to full council for full council approval to publish. Publication, if approved, will be followed by a 6-week inspection period, which will be between 9th of November and the 21st of December, in which representations could be made, but on grounds of legality and soundness. Then it will be essentially put on hold until it goes to inspection by an inspector is appointed by the government. So the local plan underpins everything the council does. It gives the local authority control over what is developed and where. It's much more than housing, but although it is an important element. And it is the instrument that gives the council and the planning committee the confidence to make important decisions. You only have to look over the river and see what happens if a council does not have a local plan. Decisions made by democratically elected representatives overturned on appeal in favour of developers. So the local plan covers policies that sets out ambition on city centre, the economic strategy, policies that cover transport and infrastructure, health and well-being, green spaces. We have policies that seek to restrict conversions and subdivision of properties. We have one that seeks to restrict the increase in hot food takeaways on grounds of both economic vitality and health. That one was supported unanimously by the health scrutiny. We've also, I think it's important to note that we have made the Stainsby Country Park a key strategic proposal, and that is identified on the key diagram on Appendix 4. So it's a hugely important document. It shows the council that, not developers, has control and can determine what is developed and for what purpose. And I'd hope that we can support its publication. For the minutes, Chair, I'd like to formally thank officers who have worked extremely hard to make sure this, the report has come to council today.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any questions, comments? Councillor Hobson.
We cannot agree with this local plan. We have asked you about the demolishing of the bus station on a number of occasions and were told that no decision had been made. We were told a full consultation would take place, and yet here it is in the local plan that we will have an interchange, not a bus station. Do you not listen to the people who pay to help to keep this town running, who have never been considered? There are many number of things in this plan which don't appear to have been thought through, including infrastructure, where we just keep building homes but have no thought about roads, schools, shops, doctors, dentists, etc. We realise we need to have a local plan, but unfortunately this one is not correct for our town or for the local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Branson.
Pages 75, 76 of the Middlesbrough local plan, particularly the commitment to a fully inclusive, integrated and sustainable transport network. And in particular, it mentions the commitment to reduce car dependency. And it's to that effect that I note that Middlesbrough Council has called for the introduction of franchising for local bus services. And I know that's true of other councils in the Tees Valley area. And this is much overdue because it will help to restore some of the lost bus services, especially those in the south of Middlesbrough, such as the ward of Colby Newham, which I represent. The recent Department of Transport figures show that demand for bus travel is at its lowest since 2006. And it's interesting that the reduction of bus journeys has coincided with a 55% increase in fares. and a study for the campaign for better transport has shown that funding for supported buses has halved in the last 8 years. And of course, we know that the main reason for that is because local authorities have had their budgets slashed and are not in a position to provide that support. Overall, the impact of deregulation, privatisation and massive cuts to local authority budgets have led to this crisis. Bus franchising is therefore a way forward, and I very much welcome it being introduced. It's not going to solve all the problems, but at least it will turn the corner on bus provision and enable us to provide that sustainable and integrated transport network that does not depend on people driving cars. And therefore I recommend that part of the plan, and I'm very much in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the local plan's an interesting document, and we've heard their concerns about infrastructure, and I think it's quite important to mention it, considering we've had meaningful consultation, it's bidded, as with regards to Dixon's Bank, but none of the points were taken on board. So perhaps it would be worthwhile giving the public a document that they can actually have faith in. It's not just myth. It's not something that's going to be disregarded. I mean, at a public meeting, Councillor Young was quick to point out that actually the decision stops with him and he will make the decision on just Dixon's Bank alone. That filled residents with no confidence. Then none of the consultation responses were taken on board in the decision-making process. Caveats, which were part of the Council's own commissioning of reports, were ignored, overlooked. We've seen it with Newfield Crescent. A lot of politicising of that by the Mayor, for example, promising village green status for certain areas, still to materialise, and I don't believe they're getting the support they need in achieving that. So what is different about this local plan, other than it's a document with a lot of words that the public can't actually embrace and take any faith in? And Councillor Branson's right, bus travel is down, especially in South Middlesbrough, and bus services have been cut, and deregulation was an issue. It was still an issue when the Labour government were in power, but you did nothing then. So how can we believe you now? And what are you going to do to ensure that the public are actually listened to and feel that their responses are meaningful? We seem to be coming up with documents that are gambling away the town. We're almost going back to a Victorian Middlesbrough with high density housing, poor public transport, and my Labour colleagues can groan, as long as they have their big town meal, their banquet at £36,500, that's fine. They can increase staff, but let's give the public something genuine, something that they can actually have faith in, where it feels meaningful and that they can actually be a part of, rather than just a document that's totally irrelevant, because regardless, the exec member or the Labour Control Committee will do what they deem fit and not take on board the responses.
Councillor Jacob Young.
Thank you, Chair. On page 43 of the local plan, 5.13, it says that we have a minimum requirement of 425 net dwellings per annum. Why then, given that we've already built 919 over the last 2 years, are we taking it upon ourselves to build 1,100 just south of my ward in Colby Newham? The majority of residents don't want it. We're looking at issues with the Martin Crawl becoming the Crowby Crawl already. It's then going to go into the Acklam Crawl on top of that. I'd like some answers on basically why we're choosing to build more and more houses in the south of Middlesbrough and not focusing on the town centre. You know, lots of people want small houses in the town centre rather than 3, 4 and 5 bed houses in the south of Middlesbrough. Thank you.
Okay, there are no further people indicating they wish to speak. I'll now invite Councillor Lewis Young to respond to some of the comments made.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you,
Young.
Chair. Well, Newham Hall was allocated in 2014. As for building in the town centre of Middlesbrough, we're building in Grove Hill. We have plans to build in Gresham. HDV will be building on brownfield sites. As for the bus station, interchange, we're dancing on a pinhead. The Mayor has made the pledge. It has been stated in his chamber a number of times that there will be a bus station and it will be on that site. As for lack of infrastructure, I assume that Councillor Hobson didn't actually read up to Chapter 6, because she talks about transport. Infra 1 is called Integrated Transport Strategy. Integrated 2 is Transport Requirement for New Housing Development. She talked about education. Infra 3 policy is education provision. Health and well-being, Infra 4. As for Councillor Rathmell's comments, Newfield Crescent was taken out as a result of public consultation. We will be taking, it will go to inspection, led by an inspector appointed by the government. That is for residents to take their representations there and for an inspector to decide whether this plan is sound. As for going back to Victorian Middlesbrough, I suggest Councillor Rathmell reads its history.
Okay, it's now time to go put this to a vote. All those in favour of adopting the local... Okay, all those in favour of adopting the local plan publication, please show. All those against? Okay, that vote is carried. Yes, that will be noted, Councillor. Right, agenda item 11, urgent items. There are none for this meeting. Agenda item 12, members' question time. We have one question from Councillor Lawton to the Mayor. Councillor Lawton, I invite you to ask your question.
Chair, the Mayor covered it in his statement, so I'll withdraw that question.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Right. Agenda item 18, notice of motion. Motion 134 has been withdrawn. So we go straight on to motion 135, and I invite Councillor Denise Rooney to present it. Just to remind you, Councillor Rooney, you need to read the motion out. It then needs to be seconded. Then I'll invite you to speak to it. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. The motion is that Middlesbrough Council will endeavour to reduce its purchasing and use of non-recyclable plastic. In addition, the Council will explore ways to expand the recovery and recycling of plastic that it uses. This Council will encourage partners and businesses to adopt a similar position.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Rostron. Councillor Rooney, I invite you to speak to the motion.
Right. Thank you, Chair. In 2017-18, Middlesbrough Council collected and recycled 1,291 tonnes of plastic a year. That was in comparison to Hartlepool Council, who collected 743 tonnes, and Stockton Council, who collected 1,213 tonnes. So the Council will also look to work collaboratively with partners and businesses to ensure that we all adopt a similar position. Looking at the national context, the UK government committed the UK to eliminating all avoidable plastic waste by 2042 when they launched the government's environmental plan for the next 25 years. Under the pledge, plastic waste such as carrier bags, food packaging and disposable plastic straws that litter the country and pollute the seas would be significantly reduced. So it's a good aim for us to get on board with and get involved with. On the local context, at this present time, we do not currently have any data on the amount of plastic products that are purchased by Middlesbrough Council. However, what we've proposed is that further work will be undertaken with the procurement team to try and determine if this data can be recorded moving forward. And the Council is working with neighbouring Tees Valley councils alongside the local partnerships to identify ways to maximise household recycling, and that will include plastics. Options available to reduce plastic waste at the council are work with the events team to ensure all future events are plastic free. So for example, the mailer, the Middlesbrough 10K. Ensure all events have adequate recycling facilities in situ, and work with our catering services to reduce the amount of plastic purchased, so water bottles, etc. We want to ensure that all the council depots, offices, have drinking water, therefore reducing the need of staff to purchase bottled water. They can use refillable. Remove all desk waste bins in council buildings, encouraging more recycling at work, and introduce more communal recycling areas, so bins in council offices, and then work with procurement to reduce the amount of single-use plastic purchased where economically viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, nobody looks like they want to speak, so we'll just go straight to a vote on this. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Okay, that vote is unanimous, so the motion is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 14, notice of urgent motion. There are none for this meeting. Agenda item 15, affiliation of Royal Fleet Auxiliary Wave Knights. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Members will find in front of them a report which is prepared on the basis of a request that's come in from the Royal Navy for the Council to formally affiliate itself with the RFA Wave Knight. This follows on from a history of ships that the Council has been affiliated with, most recently HMS Marlborough, which was decommissioned in the early 2000s. On that basis, obviously, this helps to build on the Council's Armed Forces Covenant, and I would commend it to members for approval.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Any questions, comments? Okay, can we agree with the recommendations? Thank you. Agenda item 16, change of committee dates. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Again, members will just see on the second page under paragraph 3 of the report a number of changed dates for Council, Executive and Overview and Scrutiny Board meetings, and I would just ask that members note the changes.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Rathmeld, yep. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just confirmation, because we've moved dates before to allow consultation as part of the budget, and we've still seen failings around that area. Will we actually be consulting correctly on this one? Thank you.
Not out with my purview,
Yeah,
Chair.
that's right. All we're talking about is this recommendation is just the change of the dates. So can we all agree recommendations? Thank you. Okay, then, agenda item 17, update on universal credit. And I know Councillor Walker's already put her apologies in, but she has had an unexpected illness today, therefore she's unable to attend the meeting to actually present this item. So I believe the Mayor's doing it in her absence. Mayor Budd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, as everybody knows, Councillor Walker is very interested in and very knowledgeable on this subject. So rather than me go through it in any detail, I'll just mention a few points which people may want to pick up on in a discussion about this. There is not a motion attached to this. This is for information, really. I don't think anybody can fail to notice that universal credit has become a bigger and bigger topic over the last couple of weeks, really. Many people have criticised universal credit for some time now. That seems to have gained momentum. John Major has recently criticised the rollout of universal credit. Gordon Brown has done something similar. I think 30 Anglican bishops have signed something around that as well. The Child Poverty Action Group has come up with figures saying that 4.3 million families would lose money from a full rollout. The government has, I think, said that it will slow things down now, although that's open to question. I believe there was going to be some motion in the House of Commons today, and I don't know what happened with that, I've got to say. Maybe somebody else does. It's, again, there seems to have crossed the House floor now, and many Tory MPs are concerned about it, trying to ensure that there's enough funding in the system, and also questioning whether the system itself works. Two worrying things. Esther McVeigh, who has really rarely been seen since, is quoted as saying that some families will receive a loss of £200 a month. Since she said that, she's only been seen getting in and out of cars and doesn't seem to want to be quoted on anything. A junior minister yesterday tried to explain things away. He said this is a test and learn process, and he repeated that 3 or 4 times. This is about people's income. This is about poor people's income on many occasions. A test and learn? That sounds like either an academic or political exercise. This is about people's lives. I don't think that phrase makes any sense whatsoever. He seemed to be very smugly happy with it, but that doesn't feel right to me when this is about people's income. So we have people from lots of different areas, lots of research. Many MPs of all sides have great reservations about universal credit, which is being introduced here now. We've seen from Newcastle, from Hartlepool, some of the difficulties that have happened with this. If this is a test and learn, then what has been learnt and what has been changed? It seems to me not a great deal. So that's, if you like, an introduction to the topic to some degree. There's a lot more information in the report in front of you. And I think we've talked for some considerable time about how we've tried to prepare individual people for this and try to mitigate some of the effects that we know will occur. So I'll be interested in people's comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Jacob Young.
Yeah, given that it's Mayor Budd presenting the report, on page 3 of the report, it talks about the community bank. We've been promised the community bank for 3 years now, and we're still yet to see any progress. So can he enlighten me in what progress he has made on his key election pledge? Thank you.
Mayor Budd.
Yeah, thank you. A community bank will actually be open tomorrow. The community bank is somewhere towards acquiring premises at the moment. Should be opened very early next year. The way in which the financial institutions that will be affected by modern credit unions have reacted to the way in which credit unions have tried to expand is quite appalling. There have been delays that have nothing to do with anybody locally. There's a lot of vested interests in this. Community banks are not popular with people who effectively lend at very, very high rates and have some interesting ways of getting the money back. It will happen. It would be really good to have 2 such organisations. You can never have too many of them. One would not want a city centre with 1 bank or building society in. I don't want a city centre with just 1 community bank in. They are very valuable institutions. Credit unions are well regarded, and we will invest in this to make sure that it works for people, and it may mitigate some of the effects of universal credit.
Councillor Matthew Storey.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to mention about universal credit in terms of mental health, which I think is quite an important part of the impact this is going to have. Universal credit is complex. It's difficult for people to understand and to manage. It's needlessly complex, but the complexity and the difficulty of the system doesn't just start when you go to the job centre, which for a lot of people is actually pretty hard in and of itself. The complexity actually starts much earlier than that. And Mind, the mental health charity, have done some research into this, and there's a couple of case studies that they did. And I just wanted to quote a couple of individual people who've been affected by benefit claims and their experience. One person says, it's not understanding the letters, it's actually opening them. Just the sight of a brown envelope sends me into a huge panic, and I can often put off opening a letter in a brown envelope. If I were you to use the words and phrases like catastrophic thinking and panic attacks, you may get a fair idea of the way and the route that this affects me. Another person said, I have a schizoaffective disorder, which includes hallucinations, paranoia and delusions, and it means I don't always understand the letters I get from the DWP. The letters are usually long and detailed, which require concentration and a certain level of understanding, and anything from the DWP I take to my community psychiatric nurses to go through it with me, otherwise I can miss very important details. Now, an overhaul of the system of the scale of universal credit involves a lot of very detailed, very complex correspondence, and a lot of these kinds of problems will occur well before a claim is even made. The British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists have warned locally of the impact of the South Tees CCG cutting back on the commissioning of counselling services, and those kind of mental health support services are exactly the kind of services that would assist people like that who have those kinds of issues to try and navigate this new system. The fact is that it's going to leave vulnerable people without their entitlements in a lot of cases and at the risk of severe financial hardship. And it's symptomatic of a programme of cuts which intersect local government, education, health, benefits. All of these things intersect, each one of this programme of cuts intersect with each other at some stage. And health cuts will impact on the universal credit impact. And one of the particular items of universal credit is ESA, which, if people saw the news today, the government is having to pay out £1.5 billion of back payments to people who haven't received the correct amount of ESA over the period of 2011 to 2014. And then in a lot of cases, that's coming out to an average of £5,000 that people haven't had. Now, in many cases, that means for 3 years they haven't had the correct amount of money. Many of those people will be put in severe financial hardship as a result of failures by the government, and that includes 180,000 people who will have been affected. Now, the point of that is that those people will have been out of pocket for many, many years, and this is only one of the benefits that the government is managing. This is only one of the benefits out of the 6 that are going to be rolled together into universal credit, and they can't even manage that correctly. If they're managing ESA so ineptly, it does not fill you with confidence for how they're going to manage putting all 6 together in a whole new system. One final thing I wanted to say is that, especially with Brexit, you hear a lot of politicians, particularly Labour politicians, but some Conservative ones as well, who say that they didn't get into politics to make people poorer, that they don't want Brexit to make people poorer because that's not why they got into politics. And I have sympathy with that viewpoint. This benefits change. This will make people poorer. As currently constituted, people will be poorer as a result of this change. And if you judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable people, then this is a shocking indictment of this society at this time under the leadership of this government.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mick Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think, to be absolutely fair, the idea of creating a benefit system that is uncomplicated, easy to apply for, and easy to understand is one that any political party would subscribe to, and I'm sure that that's true. I think, unfortunately, in this instance, the job of that was given to Ian Duncan Smith. Although it could have been worse, it could have been given to Chris Grayling, and God only knows where it would have been. But I think we've got to understand that I attended the Universal Credit presentation, the seminar that was organised by 13, and the whole day was dominated basically by the process of applying, which was extremely complicated. But what was going on in my mind was the consequences, the very human, personal consequences of people falling foul of this process. But let's not forget, universal credit, complicated as it is and difficult as it is to navigate, comes on the back of a whole series of benefit cuts. Whose aim was to get the poorest and most vulnerable in our society to pay the bill for the bankers who had their session of gambling. And Mr. Young shakes his head, and his only response to this whole thing was to ask, where have you got with the community bank? That's a bit like the dead cat syndrome, isn't it? You chuck a dead cat on the table and it distracts people from what's really going on. Because even your party are embarrassed by this, to be fair. And I really would hope there's a brake being put on the process, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure a lot of other people are as well. But we'll wait and see what comes from that. But let's not forget that that brake has come because of voluntary organisations, the Labour Party and other organisations, and Tory Party members, to be fair, who've said we've got to stop this because the consequences are appalling. And let's not forget again that this is on the back of those cuts, that even Ian Duncan Smith resigned on the fact that £2 billion was taken out of this process. £2 billion. And where was that £2 billion taken out? It was taken out by the bedroom tax, which is still there. It was taken out by the benefit cap, which is a cap on how much people can get. But I'll just very briefly, the benefit cuts also included the third child rule. Do you remember the third child rule? And it's still there, the third child rule. I thought I was living in China when I heard that policy. And just listen to this. More than 70,000 low-income families lost up to £2,000, this is prior to universal credit, lost up to £2,800 each last year after having their entitlement to benefits taken away as a result of the government's two-child policy. But even more chilling than that, 190 women were exempted from the policy after they were forced to prove to officials that their third child was conceived as a result of rape. What kind of policy is this? What kind of government is this? And the policy means that households claiming these are working people. You might remember that Osborne said that when you get up in the morning and go and do a day's work, look down the street and look at those people whose blinds are closed and they were laid in bed while you, the taxpayer, are funding their lifestyle. These are working people, working families tax credit. The clue's in the title. And those who have a third or subsequent child born after the 6th of April are unable to claim a child element worth up to £2,780 a year for this. Now, universal credit chilled me to the bone, but this has followed on from a long line of making those people in our communities that can least afford it pay for the excesses of those bankers and millionaires that were given a tax cut as a thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rathmell.
Picking up on some of the points that have just been mentioned there, I'm sure bedroom tax was a Labour policy, but I could be wrong. And I do agree. It's been said many times before that we should be doing our bit to support people when it comes to the universal credit rollout. So I'm a bit perplexed as to why we were trying to push through a school dinners increase when so many people were coming out of benefits at the same time. It's almost like we protest and complain about the government when actually doing very little to assist people ourselves. It would be interesting to know how many staff we currently have in Middlesbrough Council trained in universal credit to help with the rollout and how many we've got targeted to come in. And it would just be reassuring to members to see what additional benefits over and above we're actually doing at a local level. I mean, the report is comprehensive, I understand, but there's a lot of blaming. There's not a lot of cooperation to improve matters, and that would be worthwhile seeing. Thank you.
Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I found most upsetting about universal credit is the demonisation of the poor, the most vulnerable, the people who have to carry on their backs the responsibilities and hardship that none of us here in this chamber have to suffer with. We're all well off, but we're all well off in here. We have an income, we have a house, and we don't use food banks. To me, that's well off. And I'll tell you this, that we demonise the poor with universal credit. We make them the scapegoat. We're making them the people who are going to pay for the tax cuts to millionaires. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I understand Councillor Thompson would like to make a clarification on a point that's been raised in the chamber. Councillor Thompson.
There was a suggestion that the Labour government introduced the bedroom tax. That's absolutely untrue. And I hope that the council will withdraw that.
Yeah, Chair, if I've got the right to reply. I don't know if Councillor Thompson's aware, but it was Labour who introduced the local housing allowance based on the number of bedrooms you have for private tenants.
That's completely different, Chair, and he knows that.
Right, okay. Okay, well, there's nobody else who wishes to speak. So that being the conclusion of all business for this first meeting, I'd like to bring this first meeting to a close.